The starship Eclipse floated silently in the vast emptiness of space, its sleek metallic surface reflecting the faint light of a distant sun. On the bridge, Captain Ryan Carter stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the holographic display hovering in front of him. The image showed a swirling planet below, a chaotic mix of green and brown with jagged mountains cutting through thick clouds. It was a world that looked like it had been torn apart by some ancient force, its surface scarred and wild. Lieutenant Laura Bennett approached from her station, her boots making soft clicks against the floor. She stopped beside Ryan and glanced at the display. Her face was calm but carried a hint of concern. "Captain," she said, her voice steady, "the readings are worse than we thought. The atmosphere is toxic, the ground shakes constantly, and there are signs of massive predators." Ryan nodded without looking at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the hologram. "A Class 14 Deathworld," he murmured. "No one should be able to survive here. That's why we flagged this system during our survey months ago." He paused, his brow furrowing slightly. "But something about those energy signatures near the equator doesn't sit right. They're not natural." Laura tilted her head, studying the data on her tablet. "You're right. Those patterns don't match anything we've seen before. Could it be technology? Or maybe some kind of alien structure?" Before Ryan could respond, Ensign Daniel Holt spoke up from his seat at the scanning console. His voice was young and eager, full of curiosity. "Sir, I'm detecting faint traces of artificial structures beneath the surface. Someone or something has been here." The room fell silent for a moment as everyone processed the information. Ryan turned to face his crew, his expression serious. "Prepare an away team. We're going down." Hours later, the shuttlecraft descended toward the planet's surface, shaking violently as it pushed through layers of turbulent air. Lightning flashed outside the windows, illuminating the faces of the 4 people inside. Ryan sat in the pilot's chair, gripping the controls tightly. Beside him was Laura, her eyes scanning the instruments in front of her. Behind them, Corporal Emma Ross and Technician Jack Morales were checking their equipment, ensuring everything was ready for whatever they might find. Emma broke the silence first. "This place gives me the creeps," she said, her voice low. She tightened her grip on her rifle, her knuckles turning white. "It feels like it's alive, like it knows we're coming." Jack chuckled nervously. "Relax, Corporal. It's just a planet. Planets can't think." "Maybe not," Emma replied, "but they sure can kill you." The shuttle touched down in a small clearing surrounded by towering trees. Their bark was blackened and cracked, as if burned by some great fire long ago. The air outside smelled sharp and metallic, mixed with the heavy scent of sulfur. Strange creatures scuttled across the ground, their bodies covered in shiny, wet skin that glistened in the dim light. Some of them had too many legs, while others had no eyes at all. Ryan stepped out first, followed closely by Laura, Emma, and Jack. Each of them moved carefully, their weapons drawn and their senses alert. The wind howled around them, carrying with it the sound of distant thunder. The sky above was a swirling mass of gray and green, the sun barely visible through the thick clouds. "This way," Jack said, pointing ahead with his scanner. "The signal is coming from about 50 meters northeast." They began to move forward, cutting through the dense undergrowth. The plants seemed to resist their efforts, vines snapping back into place after being cut and leaves curling inward when touched. It was as if the forest itself was trying to keep them out. After 20 minutes of slow progress, they came upon a large crater filled with twisted metal debris. At first glance, it looked like the remains of some ancient spacecraft. Pieces of hull plating lay scattered across the ground, rusted and warped by time. Strange symbols were etched into the wreckage, faded but still visible. Ryan crouched down to examine one of the markings more closely. "These aren't alien," he said, running his fingers over the grooves. "They're human." Laura knelt beside him, brushing away dirt to reveal more of the design. Her breath caught in her throat. "These insignias, they're old. Really old. From before the Federation even existed." Emma frowned, looking around uneasily. What does that mean? Humans were here centuries ago? How is that possible? Ryan stood up, his mind racing. I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. As they continued exploring the area, they discovered more clues. Fragments of buildings peeked out from beneath layers of vegetation, their walls cracked and crumbling. Rusted machinery lay half buried in the soil, some parts still humming faintly with residual power. And then there were the bones. Human, skeletons dressed in tattered uniforms, their faces frozen in expressions of fear or pain. It's like they tried to build a colony here, Laura said, her voice trembling slightly. But something went wrong, something terrible. Jack adjusted, his scanner again, his brow furrowed in concentration. There's more underground, a lot more. We need to dig deeper. Ryan nodded, his jaw set firmly. Let's keep moving. Whatever happened here, it's not over yet. As they pressed onward, the feeling of unease grew stronger. The forest seemed to close in around them, shadows stretching unnaturally long despite the dim light. Every step felt heavier, every breath harder to take. They weren't alone anymore. They could feel it. Somewhere, hidden among the trees, something was watching them, and it wasn't happy they had come. The away team moved deeper into the forest, their footsteps crunching softly against the damp ground. The air grew thicker with every step, pressing down on them like a heavy blanket. Strange sounds echoed around them, low growls, sharp clicks, and the occasional rustle of leaves that seemed too deliberate to be natural. Ryan led the group, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Laura followed close behind, her hand resting lightly on the weapon strapped to her side. Emma and Jack brought up the rear, their faces tense as they kept watch for danger. After what felt like hours, they reached the edge of a wide clearing. In the center stood the remains of a large structure, its walls crumbling and covered in thick vines. Parts of it were still intact, though barely. A jagged doorway yawned open like a mouth, inviting them inside. The energy signature they had been tracking was stronger here, pulsing faintly beneath the surface. This is it, Jack said, holding up his scanner. Whatever's causing the signal, it's inside. Ryan nodded, motioning for the others to follow him. They stepped cautiously into the building, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. The floor was littered with debris, broken furniture, shattered glass, and more of the strange symbols, etched into the walls. Some of the markings were fresh, as if they had been carved recently. Laura paused near one of the walls, running her fingers over the grooves. These aren't random designs, she said quietly. They're telling a story. Ryan joined her, squinting at the carvings. They depicted scenes of struggle and survival, people fighting off monstrous creatures, building shelters from scraps and adapting to the harsh environment. But there was something else, too. In some of the images, the humans didn't look entirely human anymore. Their bodies were twisted, elongated, with features that seemed almost alien. What happened to them? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She gripped her rifle tighter, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I don't know, Ryan admitted. But whatever it was, it changed them. As they moved further into the structure, the air grew colder, sending shivers down their spines. The walls began to change too, becoming smoother and darker, as if made from a different material altogether. Faint, glowing lines ran along the surfaces, pulsing gently in time with the energy signal. It was clear now that this wasn't just an old human settlement, it was something far more advanced. Suddenly, Jack stopped in his tracks, his scanner beeping rapidly. Captain, look at this, he exclaimed, pointing to a section of the wall ahead. Embedded within it was a panel covered in buttons and switches, all lit with a soft blue light. Do you think it still works? Laura asked, stepping closer to examine it. Only one way to find out, Ryan replied. He reached out hesitantly and pressed one of the buttons. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low hum, the panel came to life. Lights flickered on throughout the room, revealing rows of equipment lining the walls. Some of it looked familiar. Computers, monitors, tools. But much of it was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Emma let out a low whistle. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. Before anyone could respond, a loud crash echoed through the chamber. The team spun around, weapons raised, searching for the source of the noise. From the shadows emerged a figure, tall and hunched, its body obscured by the dim light. As it stepped forward, the details became clearer and more horrifying. The creature was humanoid, but grotesquely altered. Its arms were long and muscular, ending in clawed hands that flexed menacingly. Its skin was mottled with patches of fur and scales, and its face bore hints of humanity beneath distorted features. Most unsettling of all were its eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness. "Stay back," Ryan shouted, stepping protectively in front of his crew. His voice was firm, but there was no mistaking the tension in his tone. To their astonishment, the creature didn't attack. Instead, it tilted its head, studying them with an intelligence that sent chills down their spines. Then, without warning, it spoke, not with words, but with fragmented thoughts projected directly into their minds. Images flashed before their eyes. Memories of pain, loss, adaptation, triumph. Scenes of humans struggling to survive, merging, with the planet's native life forms evolving into something new, and then came a single clear message. "You shouldn't have come." The team froze, stunned by the intrusion into their thoughts. Ryan recovered first, lowering his weapon slightly. "We mean no harm," he said aloud, though he wasn't sure if the creature would understand. "We're explorers. We didn't know anyone lived here." The creature stared at him for a long moment, its glowing eyes unreadable. Then it turned and disappeared back into the shadows, leaving the team alone once again. "What was that?" Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "What did it mean?" "I don't know," Ryan admitted. He glanced at the others, seeing the same mix of fear and confusion on their faces. "But I think we just found our answers." Back outside, the forest seemed even darker than before, the shadows stretching longer as night began to fall. The team hurried back toward the shuttle, their minds racing with questions. Who, or what, were those creatures? How had they survived on such a hostile world? And why had they warned the team to leave? When they finally reached the clearing where the shuttle waited, Ryan called for a status update. "Jack, scan the area, again. See if you can pick up any more signals." Jack nodded, pulling out his scanner. After a few moments, he frowned. "Sir, there's something else nearby. Multiple signatures moving fast." "Get ready," Ryan ordered, raising his weapon. The others followed suit, forming a defensive circle around the shuttle. The wind picked up, carrying with it the sound of heavy footsteps and low growls. From the trees emerged several more of the creatures, their glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. They moved silently, their movements fluid and predatory. The team tensed, preparing for a fight, but the creatures stopped just short of the clearing, watching them intently. One of them stepped forward, larger and more imposing than the rest. Like the others, it was a mix of human and animal. Its body adapted to the brutal conditions of the planet. But there was something different about this one, something regal in its posture, commanding in its presence. It raised a clawed hand, pointing toward the shuttle. Then, in the same mental voice as before, it spoke. "Leave now, or stay forever." The message was clear. They were being given a choice, but accepting it meant trusting these beings, risking everything they had worked so hard to uncover. Ryan hesitated, weighing the options. Finally, he lowered his weapon and nodded. "We'll go," he said, his voice steady. "For now." The creatures watched silently as the team boarded the shuttle and prepared for takeoff. As the engines roared, to life and the craft lifted off the ground, Ryan looked out the window at the planet below. Its surface was wild and untamed, a place of unimaginable danger, and perhaps incredible secrets. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. This was only the beginning. Back aboard the Eclipse, the mood was tense. The away team gathered in the briefing room, their faces pale and drawn from the events on the planet below. Captain Ryan Carter sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable as he listened. to each member recount what they had seen. Laura spoke first, her voice steady but laced with unease. The creatures. They're not just animals, she began. They're intelligent. They communicated with us not through words but through thoughts, images, memories. She paused, glancing around the room. And those memories showed humans. Humans changing, adapting, becoming something else. Emma leaned forward, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. They didn't look human anymore, though, not really. Those things down there, they're monsters. Ryan held up a hand to silence her. We don't know enough yet to call them that. What we do know is this. Centuries ago, humans came to that planet. They crashed or landed somehow and were forced to adapt to survive, but instead of dying out, they changed, evolved. And now they're part of that world. Jack nodded slowly, tapping his fingers on the table. The tech we found, the glowing panels, the advanced equipment, it wasn't alien. It was human-made. Or at least, it started that way. Over time, they must have combined their own knowledge with whatever they learned from the planet's ecosystem. Laura frowned, flipping through the notes on her tablet. But why would they stay? Why not try to leave? Even if the environment was hostile, you'd think they'd find a way to escape eventually. Maybe they couldn't, Ryan said quietly. His eyes were distant, as if he were piecing together fragments of a puzzle. Or maybe they didn't want to. From what we saw, they've become predators. Apex hunters. That kind of power, it changes people. Maybe they decided they didn't need Earth anymore. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. These weren't refugees clinging to survival. They were conquerors, masters, of a world so brutal it killed nearly everything else. And now outsiders had arrived, threatening the fragile balance they had built. Over the next few days, the crew of the Eclipse debated their next move. Some argued for immediate withdrawal, believing further contact would only provoke the transformed humans. Others insisted on staying, convinced they owed it to their lost kin to learn more. In the end, Ryan made the decision to attempt communication again, but cautiously. We'll send another message, he announced during a meeting with senior officers. Let them know we're not here to take anything from them. We just want to understand. Laura volunteered to lead the second away team, determined to bridge the gap between the two groups. Alongside her went Emma, Jack, and 2 additional crew members, medic Sarah Klein and engineer David Park. Armed with recording devices, medical, supplies, and gifts meant to show goodwill, they returned to the surface. This time they landed closer to the equator, where the energy signatures were strongest. The landscape here was even harsher than before, with jagged cliffs rising sharply into the sky and rivers of molten rock cutting through the terrain. Strange, insect-like creatures buzzed overhead, their wings shimmering like glass. Despite the hostility of the environment, the team pressed on, following the faint hum of machinery emanating from beneath the ground. After hours of searching, they discovered an entrance, a massive doorway carved into the side of a cliff. Unlike the ruins they had explored earlier, this structure appeared to be fully functional, its surface smooth and unmarked by time. A faint blue light pulsed along the edges, inviting them inside. As they stepped through the doorway, they found themselves in a vast chamber filled with glowing consoles and humming generators. The air was cool and dry, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat outside. At the far end of the room stood several of the transformed humans, their glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. One of them stepped forward, taller and broader than the others. Its body was a patchwork of muscle and scale, its face a blend of human and animal features. Yet there was no mistaking the intelligence in its gaze, or the authority it carried. You return, it said, its mental voice resonating in their minds. Why? Laura took a step forward, holding up her hands to show she meant no harm. We came to learn, she replied aloud, about your people, about how you survived here. The creature tilted its head, studying her carefully. Then it gestured toward one of the walls where images began to appear, scenes of devastation, of ships falling from the sky, of desperate humans clawing their way through a merciless wilderness. The pictures shifted, showing acts of cooperation and transformation, bodies merging with beasts, minds expanding beyond their limits. Survival at any cost. Our ancestors fled war, the creature explained. They sought refuge among the stars. When they arrived here, they thought they would die. Instead, they became stronger, faster, better. Sarah spoke up hesitantly, her voice trembling. But did they lose themselves? Their humanity? The creature's eyes narrowed. Humanity is weakness. We shed it to endure, to thrive. Emma exchanged uneasy glances with Jack. This wasn't just adaptation. It was evolution-driven, by necessity and choice. These beings had sacrificed their past to secure their future. But at what cost? Laura tried again, her tone gentle but firm. We don't want to take your home. We only wish to understand. Can we help you? Share knowledge? Medicine? For a long moment, the creature said nothing. Then it turned to the others behind it, exchanging silent looks. Finally, it faced the team once more. You may stay, it said, but tread carefully. Trust must be earned. Over the following days, the team worked alongside the transformed humans, learning about their society and sharing what little they could offer. The creatures were wary but curious, allowing the visitors to observe their rituals and technology. Slowly, a fragile bond began to form, but doubts lingered in Ryan's mind. Were they helping these beings, or exploiting them? Could humanity ever truly coexist with something so fundamentally different? As the Eclipse prepared to depart, he stood on the observation deck, staring at the planet below. Laura joined him, handing him a small crystal shard engraved with both ancient human script and flowing patterns unique to the transformed humans. Do you think we did the right thing? She asked softly. Ryan exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I don't know, he admitted, but maybe home isn't just where you come from. Maybe it's also where you find yourself. With that, the Eclipse vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a world no longer forgotten, and a people rediscovering who they truly were. The Eclipse drifted silently through space, its engines humming softly as it carried its crew further from the planet they had just left behind. Yet, despite the distance growing between them and the Class 14 Deathworld, the memories of what they had seen and the questions it raised weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Captain Ryan Carter sat in his quarters, staring at the small crystal shard Laura had given him. The artifact was a symbol of the fragile connection they had forged with the transformed humans, but it also served as a reminder of how much remained unknown. On the bridge, Lieutenant Laura Bennett stood beside Ensign Daniel Holt, reviewing data collected during their time on the surface. The information painted a clearer picture of the planet's history, but it also revealed unsettling truths. The settlers who had landed there centuries ago hadn't simply adapted to survive. They had embraced drastic measures to ensure their survival. Genetic engineering, forced mutations, and even ritualistic practices had shaped them into something entirely new. They were no longer human in the traditional sense, yet fragments of their humanity lingered, buried beneath layers of instinct and primal need. We're dealing with two different species now, Laura said aloud, though more to herself than to Daniel. One that came from Earth and one that evolved here, and we're caught in the middle. Daniel nodded slowly, scrolling through the files on his console. Do you think they'll ever want to reconnect with humanity, or are they too far gone? Kurar didn't answer immediately. She turned her gaze toward the viewport, where the distant stars shimmered faintly against the blackness of space. I don't know, she admitted, but I do know this: they're not monsters, they're survivors, and maybe that's all anyone can ask for. Back on the planet, life continued as it always had, harsh, unforgiving, and relentless. The transformed humans went about their routines, hunting, building, and maintaining the remnants of their ancient technology. But the arrival of the Eclipse's crew had stirred something within them. Memories long buried began to resurface, triggered by the artifacts and stories shared by the visitors. Some saw it as a threat, a reminder of a past they had worked so hard to escape. Others viewed it as an opportunity, a chance to reclaim pieces of their identity without surrendering the strength they had gained. Among these was Kale, the leader who had first confronted the away team. He was older than most of his kind, his body bearing scars from countless battles and hardships. His mind, however, was sharp, filled with knowledge passed down through generations. Unlike many of his peers, he harbored no hatred for the outsiders. Instead, he felt curiosity and a faint spark of hope. Kale gathered a small group of trusted allies and led them to the chamber where the Eclipse's crew had spent much of their time. There, etched into the walls, were murals depicting the journey of his people, from their arrival as desperate refugees to their transformation into apex predators. Beneath those images lay newer carvings, created during the brief period of contact with the visitors. These showed scenes of cooperation, exchange, and tentative trust. "This changes nothing," one of Kale's companions growled, his voice low and guttural. "They are outsiders, weak, unworthy." Kyle shook his head, his glowing eyes narrowing. "They are not weak. They survived the same skies that brought us here. They endured the same trials, and now they seek understanding. That is worth something. But what if they return?" Another asked, his claws flexing nervously. "What if they bring others? What if they try to take what is ours?" "They will not," Kyle replied firmly. "Not unless we allow it. For now, we watch. We learn. And if they prove themselves worthy, we decide then what comes next." Meanwhile, aboard the Eclipse, the crew prepared for their next mission. The ship's systems were running smoothly, supplies replenished after weeks of careful rationing. Yet the atmosphere among the crew was subdued. Conversations were quieter, laughter less frequent. The encounter with the transformed humans had left an indelible mark on everyone, forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths about survival, identity, and the cost of adaptation. Captain Ryan called a meeting in the briefing room, gathering his senior officers to discuss their findings. Laura presented her report first, summarizing the data and observations collected during their stay. Her tone was measured, but her words carried weight. "These beings are descendants of humans," she explained, projecting holographic images onto the table. "But they've undergone changes so profound that they're almost unrecognizable. Their biology, their culture, their very way of thinking, it's all been shaped by the planet's environment. They've sacrificed much of what made them human to survive." Ryan leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "And yet, they still carry traces of their origins. Fragments of language, symbols, even emotions. It's like they're holding on to something. Or someone." Medic Sarah Klein spoke up next, her voice soft but steady. "From a medical perspective, their genetic modifications are incredible. They've essentially rewritten their DNA to adapt to conditions that would kill any normal human within minutes. But it's come at a cost. Their bodies are stronger, yes, but their minds, and they're different. More primal, less restrained." Engineer David Park chimed in, gesturing toward the holograms. "Their technology reflects that duality. It's advanced, but not in the way we're used to. It's organic, almost alive, like they've merged their machines with the planet itself." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. These weren't just survivors. They were pioneers, forging a new path in a world that refused to yield. But could humanity coexist with such a species? Could they truly understand each other, or were they destined to remain strangers? Ryan broke the silence, his voice firm but tinged with uncertainty. "We've made contact. We've opened a door. Now it's up to them to decide whether to walk through it or close it forever." Days turned into weeks as the Eclipse traveled deeper into uncharted space. The crew kept busy with routine tasks, but thoughts of the Deathworld lingered. For some, it was a source of inspiration, a testament to the resilience of life. For others, it was a cautionary tale, a warning of what could happen when survival became the only goal. One evening, Laura found herself alone on the observation deck, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. Ryan joined her unexpectedly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her before leaning against the railing beside her. "Do you think we'll hear from them again?" he asked, his voice quiet. Laura sipped her drink, considering the question. "Maybe, if they choose to reach out. But even if we don't, we've already changed things, for them and for us." Ryan nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "It's strange, isn't it? To think that somewhere out there, a piece of humanity still exists, even if it doesn't look like us anymore." Laura smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the point. Humanity isn't just about how we look or where we come from. It's about what we carry inside us, the memories, the connections, the choices we make. Even if they don't see themselves as human anymore, they're still part of our story." Ryan didn't respond right away. Instead, he let the silence stretch between them, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's engines. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let's hope they remember that too." The Eclipse continued its journey through the stars, its crew carrying with them the weight of what they had discovered on the Class 14 Deathworld. Captain Ryan Carter had made his decision. They would not interfere further unless the transformed humans reached out first. The choice was theirs to reconnect with their origins or remain as they were, guardians of a brutal and unforgiving world. But as the days passed, the planet grew smaller in the ship's rear cameras, fading into the vastness of space. Yet the memory of the encounter lingered like a shadow over the crew. Conversations at meals often turned to speculation about the beings they had met. Were they truly human anymore? Had they abandoned their past willingly, or had survival forced their hand? These questions haunted everyone, but none more so than Laura Bennett. She spent hours poring over the data collected during their mission, searching for answers that seemed just out of reach. One evening, she sat alone in the science lab, staring at holographic projections of the murals they had documented. The images told a story of pain, adaptation, and triumph, a tale of humanity pushed to its limits. But there was something else too, something she couldn't quite put into words, a sense of longing, of loss. It was as if the transformed humans carried within them not only the strength to endure, but also the scars of what they had left behind. David Park entered the lab quietly, holding a tablet under one arm. He glanced at the holograms before speaking. "Still thinking about them?" Laura nodded without looking up. "I can't stop," she admitted. "They're incredible. Terrifying, yes, but also incredible. What they've done, it's beyond anything we've seen before." David pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "Do you think they'll ever try to leave that planet? Or are they too tied to it now?" "I don't know," Laura replied. "They've become part of it. Their bodies, their minds, even their culture. It's all connected to that place. Leaving might mean losing themselves again." "But isn't that what they wanted?" David asked. "To survive? To thrive?" Laura hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the console. Survival is one thing, thriving is another, and somewhere along the way they stopped being just survivors. They became predators, masters of their world. Maybe that's enough for them. Back on the Deathworld, Cale stood atop a cliff overlooking the molten rivers that carved through the landscape. The air was thick with heat and the scent of sulfur, but he didn't seem to notice. His glowing eyes scanned the horizon, taking in the wild beauty of the planet he called home. Behind him, several of his kind gathered, waiting silently for his next move. In the weeks since the Eclipse's departure, the transformed humans had resumed their routines, hunting and building as they always had. But Cale found himself unable to let go of the memories stirred by the visitors. The artifacts they had shared, the stories, the images, they had awakened something deep within him. A fragment of his ancestors' humanity, buried beneath centuries of evolution. He turned to face the others, his voice steady but commanding. "We have lived here for generations," he began, his mental voice resonating in their minds. "We have adapted, survived, thrived. But we are not just creatures of this world. We carry within us the blood of those who came before, those who dreamed of stars. A low growl rippled through the group, a mix of unease and defiance. One of the younger members stepped forward, his claws flexing nervously. What does it matter? The past is gone. We are strong now. Why look back? Kyle fixed him with an intense gaze. Because understanding where we came from helps us decide where we go next. The outsiders showed us that. They reminded us of what we once were and what we could still be. The young one hesitated, unsure how to respond. Another member of the group, older and wiser, spoke up. And what do you propose, Kale? Do we seek them out? Leave this place? Not yet, Kale replied firmly. But we prepare. We learn. If they return, or if we find a reason to leave, we must be ready. For ourselves. For our future. Months passed aboard the Eclipse, and life settled into a familiar rhythm. The crew focused on their missions, exploring new systems and mapping uncharted territories. Yet every so often someone would mention the Deathworld, sparking debates about the nature of humanity and survival. Some argued that the transformed humans represented the ultimate expression of resilience, while others believed they had lost too much of themselves in the process. Ryan often joined these discussions, listening more than speaking. He knew there were no easy answers, no clear path forward. Humanity itself was a spectrum, a constantly shifting concept shaped by circumstance and choice. Who was he to judge whether the beings on that planet were truly human or something else entirely? One day, as the Eclipse approached a dense asteroid field, Ensign Daniel Holt rushed onto the bridge, excitement evident in his voice. Captain, you need to see this. Ryan turned to face him, raising an eyebrow. What is it, Ensign? Daniel handed him a tablet, pointing to a series of readings displayed on the screen. It's a transmission, weak, fragmented, but definitely artificial, and it's coming from the direction of the Deathworld. The room fell silent as everyone processed the news. Ryan studied the data carefully, his mind racing. Could it be a message from the transformed humans, or was it simply interference, a trick of cosmic radiation? Lieutenant Bennett, Ryan said, turning to Laura. Start analyzing the signal, see if you can clean it up. Laura nodded, already heading toward her station. As she worked, the tension in the room grew palpable. Minutes stretched into hours, each second feeling longer than the last. Finally, Laura looked up, her expression a mix of disbelief and awe. It's them, she said softly. They're calling us. The message was brief but unmistakable. A series of images flashed across the screen, scenes of the planet, of the transformed humans, and of the artifacts they had shared with the Eclipse's crew. Accompanying the visuals was a single phrase transmitted in fragmented thoughts. We remember. Ryan stared at the display, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. The moment they had been waiting for. The transformed humans had chosen to reach out, to acknowledge the connection between their past and present. Whatever came next, it would change everything. Send a response, Ryan ordered, his voice firm. Tell them we're listening. As the Eclipse adjusted its course, heading back toward the Deathworld, Ryan stood on the observation deck, gazing at the stars ahead. Laura joined him, holding the crystal shard they had been given during their last visit. Do you think we're doing the right thing? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I don't know. But maybe right isn't the point. Maybe it's about finding a way forward. Together. With that, the Eclipse surged forward, its engines glowing brightly against the endless void. Ahead lay a planet of fire and shadow, a place where humanity had evolved into something new, and perhaps, just perhaps, a chance to rediscover what it meant to be human.